Good morning. I call the meeting of the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee to order. It is Thursday, October 9th at 9:32 a.m. Will you please call the roll?
Avalos, Canal,
Here.
Ryan, Novick,
Here.
Mario.
Here. And I believe Councillor Avalos will be joining us at around 10:15. Christopher, will you please read the statement of conduct?
Welcome to the meeting of the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee. To testify before this committee in person or virtually, you must sign up in advance in the committee agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda/climate-resilience-and-land-use-committee or by calling 311. Information on engaging with the committee can be found at this link. Registration for virtual testimony closes 1 hour prior to the meeting. In-person testifiers must sign up before the agenda item is heard. If public testimony will be taken on an item, individuals may testify for 3 minutes unless the chair states otherwise. Your microphone will be muted when your time is over. The chair preserves order. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or committee deliberations will not be allowed. If you cause a disruption, a warning will be given. Further disruption will result in ejection from the meeting. Anyone who fails to leave once ejected is subject to arrest for trespass. Additionally, the committee may take a short recess and reconvene virtually. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. We only have one item on our agenda today, and we're going to have an additional informational briefing on the CEI Hub policy project and a discussion of the current plan. Will you please read the next item?
Item 1, Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub Policy Project Discussion Draft.
We have staff today from the Community and Economic Development Service area to give an informational overview of the CEI Hub policy project discussion and the draft alternative. So this is not the final stage of the plan. We're still taking feedback on that. And I'll flag that we didn't open this item for discussion or for public testimony in our meeting today because the discussion draft is currently open in the middle. It's currently in the middle of the public comment period, so we wanted to make sure that people were directing all of their comments to the right space. So members of the public that are tuning in can click on the link on our committee page or go directly to the MAP app to submit comments, and you can find it easily by Googling CEI Hub MAP app. So for now, I would like to invite Director Eric Engstrom from BPS, Patricia, Tom Armstrong, and we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Councillor, and good morning. I'm Eric Engstrom, for the record, Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. With me is Patricia Diefenderfer, Chief Planner, and Tom Armstrong, Supervising Planner. Before I turn it over to them, I did want to address one question that's come up a lot to me, which is, and thank the council again for allocating some money in the last budget to this project. One question I've been getting is what happened to that money? Have you hired anyone with that money? And I want to just address that right off the bat. We have been trying to spend the federal grant money first before we touch any money that the council has given us. For some reasons, maybe you can imagine, we're nervous about the federal money disappearing, and we want to make sure we move this project forward. So if we successfully spend the federal money, we will pivot to continuing work with the money that the council has allocated in furtherance of this work. But I just wanted to address that question before I turn it over, because it's been a common question I've been getting from council offices. So with that, I will pass it to Patricia.
Good morning, Chair, Councilors. Patricia Diefenderfer, for the record, Chief Planner, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Tom's going to provide most of the presentation here today. We're here just to support and answer questions as needed. As you noted, Chair Murillo, this presentation is to provide an overview of the discussion draft, which has 4 different alternatives that have been put forward for public review and comment, and that, as you noted, comments should be directed to staff currently on this discussion draft, and I believe the comment period goes through October 17th. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tom. Thank you.
Good morning, councilors. I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and have been leading our work on this CI Hub project. I'm going to share a presentation here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start out by giving you some background on the project scope and a little bit of what we heard from our community engagement in the alternatives development phase of the project. And then I'll give you an overview of the 4 alternatives that are in the discussion draft and talk a little bit about the next steps for the project. So we are sort of still early in this process. We started back in May to launch the project, and through the summer we conducted a number of outreach meetings with community partners to get feedback and help inform how we put together these 4 alternatives. And then we published a discussion draft back in mid-September and have been doing a number of outreach meetings through September and October to take public comment. That comment comes into staff, and we use that to inform a single alternative that we will put forward in the proposed draft. And the proposed draft will go to the Planning Commission, and they will hold additional public hearings and take public testimony and deliberate, and hopefully sometime in the new year we'll vote on a recommendation to you that will become the recommended draft that will come to council, and then council will get to deliberate and take public testimony and make amendments before we reach the final adopted plan. Just for some basic background, the CI Hub, the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, is the area along the Portland Harbor between the Willamette River and Highway 30 in the Northwest Industrial Zone. It's about a 6-mile stretch that stretches out beyond the St. John's Bridge. These are typically the tank farms that you see along Highway 30. There are 11 different bulk fuel terminals. There are over 600 storage tanks with over 350 million gallons of capacity to store in this area. Most of those, 10 of those bulk fuel terminals are liquid fuel terminals, petroleum products, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. There is one liquid natural gas facility operated by Northwest Natural, and that is a peak load facility that is used to meet sort of peak wintertime heating demand. The hub is important. It is at the confluence of many different connections, if you will. About 2/3 of our liquid fuel comes from the Puget Sound refineries via the Olympic pipeline that ends. The end of the pipe is here in Portland in this hub. And then we also have about another 25% or so of our fuel comes in via barge, and then another 10% or so comes in via rail. From that and through that hub, the fuel is distributed throughout Oregon, Southwest Washington, Eastern Oregon, parts of the Panhandle. Most of that fuel comes into Portland. There's a smaller pipeline that goes down to Eugene. About 70% of the fuel is consumed in the Willamette Valley between Portland and Eugene. Some of it gets barged upstream, upriver to serve Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington. And the rest is trucked out to other parts of Oregon. It serves about 90% of the fuel that is consumed in Oregon. We get a little bit, that other 10% comes from mostly via truck from neighboring states, and/or there is another big fuel facility in Pasco, Washington, that has a pipeline connection to refineries in Salt Lake City that also helps to serve and meet fuel demand in Eastern Oregon. The hub is also at great risk, especially in terms of an earthquake and a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. It's at high risk of liquefaction. And in turn, that represents a high risk for wildfires, for spills, for burning of the spilled fuel product to create toxic air quality. Back in 2022, we partnered with Multnomah County to do a risk assessment on the potential damages in a Cascadia subduction earthquake that really showed the amount of damage that could be done with contamination in the river and the extensive cleanup costs that would be associated with such an event. And I will say, that especially the information that started to come out in around 2015 around the threats that are posed by a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake really heightened the urgency to address what goes on in the CI hub, and then also in terms of emergency management and preparedness. So to some of the particulars for this particular project, we received a FEMA hazard mitigation grant to build on some previous work that we have done in terms of land use policy and zoning code amendments that I'll talk about in a minute. And we wanted to build on that work and to extend it. And so the purpose of this project is to revisit our comprehensive plan policies and update them and to better guide development at these bulk fuel terminals, and to explore options and update our regulations, including the zoning code, for activities and development that occurs at the existing terminals. And we're also using this opportunity to convene our partner agencies at the regional level, the state level, the federal level, to not only address these regulations, but look at how can we better coordinate our interagency efforts, especially with respect to emergency management. I want to touch on an issue that comes up when we talk about the hub, and that is the idea of relocating it somewhere else. And it's a very tricky issue, but it's really beyond the scope of this project, primarily because there are no safer locations in Portland. If you think about where our major industrial districts are, they're along the Willamette River, they're along the Columbia Corridor. That all really has basically the same high risk of liquefaction in an earthquake. It also, especially areas along the Columbia Corridor, they have rail access, but they don't currently have access to the Olympic pipeline. There is a smaller pipeline that serves the airport, but there would need to be new pipeline connections built, and it also does not have access. The Columbia Corridor in particular does not have marine access beyond once you get up in the north there at the confluence of the Willamette and the Columbia in Terminal 6. So, there's not a really good other place in Portland for this use. I will say the zoning code itself is not really a tool that we have used to require the removal or relocation of existing storage facilities. And then I think more importantly, looking out beyond Portland, to relocate some of the facilities further down in the Willamette Valley that obviously extends beyond the city's authority, and it becomes a state issue. And that is one area where we have, as a city, participated in state discussions around that. We have lobbied for the state to be more active around that, and there are interests and have been in the past state initiatives, especially in terms of emergency preparedness and having a better, more resilient, distributed access to fuel throughout the Willamette Valley. But again, the idea of relocating this hub is really outside the scope of this project. I want to talk a little bit about what we've heard so far and what went into informing the creation of these alternatives. I will start that this work has really built on work that we've been doing over the last 10 years, and the community conversations that have gone on about how we regulate development in the CI hub. But we really started in earnest and focused on this project in May. And we held a number of community meetings and meetings with subject matter experts and industry representatives through May, June, July to really explore what alternatives might look like. And some of the things that we've heard in particular from the community was to really prioritize health and safety outcomes. Again, looking at how can we reduce the risk from the existing facilities, and even begin to look at how can we draw down or reduce the capacity of those facilities over time. We have a lot of discussions about a more holistic approach, being more active in the emergency management coordination, and we are partnering with staff at the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management and consulting with them as we bring these policies forward. And they, as staff from PBEM, have been at our events and participating in this project. I think a couple of other things that we've heard that begin to really get beyond the scope of this project and the time frame that we have under the federal grant is to look at how we might regulate a wider range of hazardous materials, not just looking at the liquid fuels, but look at some of the other hazardous chemicals that are handled in this area and in our industrial areas. And then also look at some of what goes on at the smaller distributors, not just these 11 large terminals that are really the gateway facilities, but to look at what happens further down the supply chain and how we regulate those activities. And then finally, there's a desire to look at what comes next. As we sort of reduce the need for liquid fuels and in turn reduce the need for these terminals, what can we do next? What could happen with that land? These are very land extensive uses, and so as they begin to shrink over time, what could come next? And I think that's just a little bit beyond our ability right now. We're not seeing that shrinkage just yet. And so we're really focused on, what can we do to regulate development activities at these existing terminals. From industry and business, what we've really heard is the need for an economic impact analysis, and that really gets at ensuring that we and Oregon have the fuel, the liquid fuel that we need for our lifestyle and our economy. We've heard a lot around the uncertainty around the transition to renewable fuels and the role that renewable liquid fuel will play as we go through that transition to electrify our vehicle fleet, and just the need to have some flexibility to manage, especially this short-term transition, before we expect to really free up capacity in the system as electric vehicles are more widely used. There's a lot of interest in what our renewable fuels are needed, especially around SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, and what role that can play in reducing our carbon emissions. There's real concern that we are well coordinated and consistent with the DEQ seismic mitigation requirements. So DEQ is right in the middle of a state required seismic upgrade planning process. All of the terminals have submitted seismic risk assessments that are currently undergoing DEQ review. And then we expect next year that each of the terminals will begin to craft what are called seismic risk mitigation plans, which are basically 10-year investment plans that shows how they're going to upgrade all of their facilities to the most current seismic safety standards. And in turn, all of those improvements are going to have to come to the city for building permits. And so we want to make sure that whatever regulations we put in place are going to be complementary and supportive of the DEQ seismic mitigation requirements. And then the final group that we've talked to and have been participating in our meetings is labor, and their interest really is along interest in this transition to renewables and sustainable aviation fuel, as well as the seismic upgrades and the construction work and activity that is going to be associated, especially with all of that seismic upgrade work. So on to the discussion draft. So we published it on September 16th. We present 4 alternatives for key land use policies and regulations. As Patricia mentioned, we have public comment open through October 17th. So far, we've hosted 6 public events, both in person and online, and I'll talk a little bit about those later. As was mentioned, we have our MAP app activated for online comments. So far, we've received about 140 comments have come in, and that we're going to use all of that feedback, all of those discussions that we have at the public events, all of the online comments that come in, to really help inform us on what goes into developing a proposed draft. And I think I will note at this point that proposed draft is not necessarily just picking one of these alternatives and going with it, but it's going to be a mix. We're going to, and it can be an extension of these alternatives where we can take the best elements, we can listen to what people are saying to us, issues, questions that we get, issues that are raised, to be able to sort of fine tune into a really consolidated proposed alternative. So I'm gonna start with what we call the regulatory alternatives, or really what primarily could go into our zoning code. And this is about regulating future development at these terminals. And these really build on what we have in place today. And so, I'll talk about that as the baseline. And this really goes back to the zoning code amendments that council passed back in 2016. We've gone through 3 rounds of appeals, and most recently, council reaffirmed and readopted these regulations back in 2022. I am happy to report that we have sort of cleared a final hurdle this week, in that the one outstanding federal court challenge that we successfully got dismissed has not been appealed. The appeal period expired earlier this week, and there were no appeals filed. So it looks like those 2022 regulations are now in place. And so we're really looking to how do we build off of those. And what those regulations currently say is no new bulk fossil fuel terminals, which we define as terminals with more than 2 million gallons of storage capacity, and some sort of what we call regional connection, that the pipeline connection or a dock or a rail line, something that allows that fuel to come in from outside the region into the hub. And so what we've said are no new ones, and then we limit the existing terminals to the fossil fuel storage capacity that was in place in 2022. So no new fossil fuel storage tanks, but we did include exceptions, and the most notable exceptions are for aviation fuel and renewable fuel. Aviation fuel, jet fuel, continues to be the one sort of component of liquid fuel consumption that continues to be forecasted for increasing demand. But I will also note that aviation fuel makes up a small percentage of the overall liquid fuel consumption today. It's somewhere around 10 to 20%, depending on which measure you're using. So those exceptions do not have any limits placed on them. So right now, terminals can come in for development permits for any amount of expansion for aviation fuel, for renewable fuels, and for a few other fuel types. We also allow for the repair and replacement of existing tanks, because we want to support those seismic improvements over time to make whatever remains at these terminals safer in the event of an earthquake. You will see a little graphic there at the bottom, and this graphic will show up in each of the alternatives that we talk about. We have the tank that represents the storage tank. The little squiggly line going to the truck represents what we call transloading facilities. So think of this as the piping, the dock connections, the rail racks that transfer the fuel from the storage tank to the truck, or the storage tank to a rail car. And so it's storage tanks and transloading infrastructure is really what we're looking at regulating the future development of. So just quickly, a broad overview. We have 4 alternatives. Each of these are sort of progressively more restrictive. So we start off with alternative 1, limit the transloading capacity for fossil fuels. Alternative 2 is limit those expansion exceptions that we have, especially for aviation and renewable fuels. Alternative 3 is prohibit all expansions, take those exceptions away, make the terminals use whatever capacity they have today. And then alternative 4 is to, again, prohibit all expansions and look at how we reduce the capacity of those terminals over time through a regulatory measure. So just to go over the details for each of these 4 alternatives, again, with alternative 1, we start with the baseline regulations. We would prohibit new fossil fuel transloading infrastructure, so new docks for that fossil fuel transfer, new rail offloading racks. We would require that any new storage tanks would be built to the higher or highest safety standard. The industry phrase is risk category 4. It's not always clear that these types of storage tanks are regulated to that highest level, and so we would look to make it to be city policy that they do have to comply with this highest standard. And then we would continue to allow for renewable and aviation fuel expansions, but we would require any expansion proposal to go through a conditional use review process. And that is a more discretionary review. It allows for public notice and public comment, and we would come up with approval criteria such as, demonstrating a need for the expanded capacity, or that the new tanks are located on the safest part of the site, or that there's a adequate emergency response plan in place. So that is one way that we could begin to put a little bit more of a discretionary review on any expansion proposal. Alternative 2, again, includes the limits on fossil fuel transloading, but we begin to, instead of a discretionary review process for expansion for renewable and aviation fuel, we just put a cap on it. We say each terminal you can have 5% additional capacity. You can, use that additional capacity for whatever you want, whether that's renewable or aviation fuel. They would get to decide. But before they're eligible for that capacity expansion, they would have to have in place what we call facility-wide containment. And if you go out there to those facilities today, you will see that they are surrounded by berms and walls. The idea is if the tanks fail and the liquid is spilling out onto the ground, that some of that will be contained on site. Unfortunately, right now, the current state and federal standard is that they only have to contain the single largest tank on the site. And what we would put in place is a requirement that the whole facility would need to be contained before you could do any sort of expansion. Alternative 3, as I said, prohibits all new expansion for any type of fuel, and all new transloading infrastructure. And that what we would expect is that available capacity today, or as the demand for gasoline, for example, continues to decline, that they could repurpose and reconfigure that existing fossil fuel capacity to meet the other needs, to convert it to aviation fuel or sustainable aviation fuel needs, but that basically we have enough capacity in place, and that we don't need any more, and that they can manage what they have and repurpose it and reuse it in a way that would meet the changing market demands. And then finally, Alternative 4 extends that prohibition on new expanded capacity even further, and to require a drawdown of storage capacity over time. This alternative has, sort of the two variables there is to require a 17% drawdown by 2035. We framed that in that way. 2035 is significant because that aligns with the DEQ required seismic mitigation investment plans. And so we want the terminals to be on notice that, hey, by 2035, you're going to have to be smaller. So don't think you're going to improve, build a new seismically improved tank. that you're not going to be able to use in 2035. And so we want to sort of get alignment with that, those investment plans. The 17% drawdown is based on a Federal Energy Information Administration forecast for the Pacific region, that shows that, you know, even the federal government is expecting a decline in the demand for liquid fuel over time. We selected the Pacific region just in recognition that the hub does serve more than Oregon. It serves Washington, it serves parts of Idaho. So we looked at that broader market area to incorporate that 17% drawdown into this alternative. Real quickly, I'll talk a little bit about some of the policy changes that we've put out for comment. Starting with our existing policies, we have one in the comprehensive plan right now. We are looking to change that. You know, one is sort of deleting reference to fossil fuel and really focus and recognize that there are lots of different types of fuel handled by these facilities and that we want to regulate all of those activities. And so we're changing fossil to bulk. And then, you know, either depending on which alternative we go with, to have the policy direction reflect that, either continue to limit these facilities, or if in the case of alternative 4, you know, what we call a stronger verb, a more directive verb to restrict those facilities. And then I think the other major change to this is the key phrase at the end of the policy, to those necessary to serve the regional market. I think back in 2016 when we initially adopted this policy, there was a lot of concern about ensuring that we continue to have enough capacity to provide the liquid fuel that we need for our economy and lifestyle. I think we're, you know, I think we are clearly at a point where we see the future demand curves declining in terms of the demand for liquid fuels. I think more importantly, what we learned from our 3 rounds of legal appeals is that the phrase regional market is very difficult to determine. Is it Portland? Is it Oregon? Is it all of, you know, parts of Southwest Washington? And that phrase also introduced challenges, constitutional challenges under what's called the Interstate Commerce Clause. And are we trying to regulate interstate commerce or not? And so we just think it's simple to delete that reference and really focus on what's going on in the hub itself. And to that end, I will note one of the things that we did hear from the community is a desire about, you know, can we have policies that specifically apply to the CI hub itself? And the answer is yes. And we've sort of picked up on that to really come up with a geography for the CI hub and really be able to have a set of policies that are more directive about the activities that occur in the hub itself, and to really elevate some of the other values and goals that we have for the area, especially around seismic upgrades and watershed protection, and then, you know, again, sort of prioritizing emergency management coordination and fostering a transition to a lower carbon economy. Again, here's just you know, what we've been doing over the last month in terms of different events to explain what's in the discussion draft, listen to comments and questions, again, we have another week or so for public comments. And then, again, we are looking to publish a proposed draft by November 10th. That date is primarily two reasons. One is to meet our obligations under the FEMA grant, and the other is to recognize the urgency of this work and to keep things moving. We have a Planning Commission hearing with public testimony scheduled for December 16th, and then the Planning Commission will deliberate in January, and then forward a recommendation to you later this spring. And then for anyone online, this is the links to our project website, where you can find links to the discussion draft, to the map app to submit public comments. And with that, I will stop my presentation, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was really helpful for us to wrap our heads around where that process is at. And I'll just reiterate again for the public who's watching, written comments are due October 17th, although we'll still have a few months to continue getting comments on the draft proposals as well. I have a few questions, and I see Councillor Novick also has his hand up. I suspect Councillor Canal will also have some questions as well. So I will go ahead and start us off, and then we'll move to Councillor Novick and Councillor Canal. Of the alternative options that we have, it looks like, from what was stated in the presentation, the only fuels that are increasing in need or for consumption is aviation fuels, and other fuels we're mainly seeing a decrease. Is that correct?
Yeah, I will, with one note, we've heard that there is a need, a shorter term need for additional capacity for renewable fuels. In that, the way it's been explained to me is that we have the fossil fuel infrastructure, and they need to begin to set up a parallel system for the renewable fuels, because they need to continue to supply the fossil fuels to sort of get over this transition for the uptake of the renewable fuels to gain momentum before it really frees up capacity on the fossil fuel side of things that could be repurposed for renewable fuels. I think one way to think about that is we have a lot of large tanks out there, and so it's not just a linear transition, but that transition is going to happen in big chunks before you can really free up a million-gallon tank that could be repurposed to something else. And so the industry is saying that they need a little bit of additional capacity to manage this renewable transition as well.
Okay. Have they given us a timeline for that transition at all? Any details?
No, I think that's where the uncertainty factor comes in, and things like the expiration of the electric vehicle tax credits at the federal level, and it just seems to be an uncertain time, even on the sort of supply side of thing and the production of renewables. I think that's where it's just very uncertain at this time.
I can certainly appreciate how the federal government is making things very uncertain for us right now. When we're looking at the alternatives that are proposed, so alternatives 1 and 2 allow for expansion, and maybe this is more of an opinion than a question, but I think any expansion would increase our risk as far as if there's a spill. And so it seems like alternative 3 and 4 are the only ones that actually limit expansion, correct?
Yes.
I guess my question is, doesn't risk reduction, if that's our main goal here for Portlanders, doesn't that require that we do storage reduction? Because the first 2 alternatives seem almost untenable to me to expand at this time.
Yeah, it depends on the frame of reference. and risk reduction compared to what is in place today, and from our perspective as land use planners, we look at, well, what's allowed under the current zoning code, and right now that is unlimited expansion for aviation fuel and renewable fuel. That represents a huge risk. Alternatives 1 put some limits on that risk, so therefore we have reduced risk. We, again, through the zoning code, have a hard time sort of addressing existing development. For the most part, if it's built and operating there, you get to continue that use. And so, reducing the risk associated with the existing terminals is very difficult to do through the zoning code. What we're trying to do, these regulations would kick in when a new development needs to occur. So, such as the rebuilding of the seismically improved tanks. Patricia, were you going to say something?
Yes, thanks. For the record, Patricia Diefendorfer. I was just going to also point out that each of these alternatives, even alternatives 1 and 2, do come with those sort of requirements that new storage tanks be built to the highest safety, seismic safety standards. So just wanting to make sure that that's kind of noted, and that is meant to work in conjunction, as Thomas said, with the DEQ seismic mitigation program, and basically help to maybe accelerate that to the degree that there is any activity happening at the hub. Tying our zoning regulations to those kinds of improvements could potentially help accelerate those plans, which are supposed to happen over, a 10-year period.
I appreciate that, but I think based on your definitions here that I'm hearing about reducing risk, it sounds like alternatives 1 through 3 are more focused on reducing the rate at which things get worse, whereas alternative 4 reduces the risk that exists today. And I think that that's a pretty important distinction to point out. I think that's all for me for now. I will pass it off to Councilor Councilor Novick to ask some questions, unless you have anything else to add on that. Okay, Councilor Novick.
One question I had is, would it be, I think you said you could mix and match among the alternatives. Would it be possible to adopt something that says you have to reduce the overall capacity, but within the context of that reduction, you can increase the amount of renewable and sustainable aviation fuel that you're putting in?
Yeah, I think currently in place, and I think within each of these, and we could be more explicit at this, is the idea that the terminals can replace and reconfigure their current capacity as they see fit, and decide which tanks have what types of fuel. And one way to think of that is, like, say they have a 1 million gallon tank out there and they need to do the seismic upgrade to it, replace it. They could replace that with 2 500,000 gallon tanks and have one for gasoline and one for sustainable aviation fuel, or whatever they decide. We're not trying to regulate what goes in the tank. We're just trying to regulate how many, not even how many tanks they have, but how much capacity overall is at these terminals.
I have a bunch of, I think what might sound like random disconnected questions, but like one is that projection by the Federal Energy Information, whatever it was, of declining fossil fuel use. When was that made? And is it informed by the actions of the current administration, such as you said, eliminating the tax credit for electric vehicles, stopping the development of any new wind power, which will make electrification as a whole, let alone green electrification, impossible, the likelihood that they'll not allow for any investment in transmission capacity to serve electrification. Basically, does that projection take into account all of the horrible things the current administration is doing to deliberately increase fossil fuel use?
Probably not. They update these forecasts every year, and so I think this forecast came out last February or March. So that probably was the way that was developed. It was probably under the previous administration and didn't fully account for the policy changes of the current administration. So we would be looking to monitor. I will say, we also include in the discussion draft information about just historic trends, and the trend lines continue to be flat or declining over time, and that's stretching back to the 90s. So I don't expect a huge swing in these trends.
Yeah, that strikes me as somewhat optimistic. I mean, given that the administration is literally doing everything it can to change those trends. Another question is, will the Planning Commission, we hear from Vivian Satterfield's folks about the extent, if any, to which our climate action plan depends on expanding renewable fuel?
We can certainly coordinate when this gets to the Planning Commission with the Sustainability and Climate Commission so that there's dialogue between the two.
And another question I have is about the transloading facilities. Why would anybody focus on those specifically? I mean, if all they're doing is loading the same stuff, that, if they're like upgrading those facilities so they're more efficient or safer or something, is there a reason to prohibit more transloading infrastructure if that doesn't actually have the effect of increasing the amount of fuel that's being used?
Yeah, that gets to this idea of throughput. So the amount of fuel moving through the system. We at the city, especially on sort of the planning and development side of things, aren't really regulating how much liquid is moving through those pipes. But if you think about development, presumably if they came in and wanted to replace a 6-inch pipe with an 8 or 12-inch pipe and a bigger pump, they could move more fuel through the system, and so they could use their existing storage capacity more efficiently. And so this is just a way of constraining other parts of the system without setting up a whole big regulatory structure of similar to the DEQ air quality permits, where we're looking at how much fuel volume is moving through in any given month.
I think we've also heard that from stakeholders that we don't necessarily want to become a national hub for renewable fuels accidentally, just because we've been at the forefront of that, and so that controls a little bit for that too.
I would also just add that I believe, similar to what we were discussing about the tanks themselves, if they were just improving these transloading facilities, they would be able to do that. And Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just the increasing of the capacity to move fuels through the system. And so another example that we typically give is the number of rail racks, for example, that are at the terminals, where increasing the number of racks could increase the ability to move more fuel through the system and get them on trains faster. So that would be the kind of thing that would be regulated by regulating the transloading facilities.
In terms of risk, I mean, DEQ is trying to address the risk that the tanks explode, and they're theoretically requiring that all of the tanks be able to resist a Category 9 earthquake by 2035. Is there also a risk simply of the risk to the economy and the functioning of the city I guess my question is, do we expect that even if there was an earthquake, even if the tanks don't explode, they'll no longer be usable and we won't have access to the fuel?
Yeah, it's a very complex system. I think one of the concerns is even access to this area. Break in the Olympic pipeline, debris in the river that prevents barges from getting upstream, bridges collapsing, landslides that take out chunks of Highway 30. But I think you start with, we want these tanks to survive, one, so they don't spill their contents, and two, that they are here and can eventually function part of an emergency management system and support the recovery of the region.
Let's see. Is there, we still have a climate, or do we have like a newly announced climate protection program at the state level, right? Which is supposed to gradually reduce the amount of fossil fuel emissions, which can only really be achieved by reducing the amount of fossil fuel used.
Yes.
So does that, will the Planning Commission hear a discussion of that and like the, whether whatever legal challenges there might be to it, et cetera, in terms of figuring out what's, it seems to me that in addition to whatever the Federal Information Agency thing said, should sort of inform our thoughts about what capacity will be needed. Because if the climate protection program is actually going to go ahead and require a 90% reduction of emissions by 2045 or whatever it is, then that would seem to be something that should be taken into account in figuring out the extent to which you can reduce capacity.
Yeah, part of the research or the data we gathered was the state forecasts as well. So that's information that we have.
Yeah, we have all the different forecasts, and I think that information actually is in the discussion draft. And as Tom noted, the use of the federal information was to acknowledge that the hub serves beyond just the state.
Yeah. And we look at those different sources. So there's a new Oregon Department of Energy Security Plan. ODOT issues their gas tax revenue projections, which is a little bit more shorter term, but and then DEQ's Clean Fuels Program has their forecasts, and we look at all of those to show that all of the arrows are pointing in the same direction. That gives us a confidence around we don't need to continue to allow unlimited expansions. Exceptions, and that we can begin to look at all of that information to develop a comfort level on how restrictive we want to be.
Final question. If I were a private citizen, I personally would want to comment before October 17th. Is there any rule against city councilors and their individual capacities filing comments? No. Okay. Thank you.
Great question, Councillor Novick. Councillor Canal.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for the presentation. I also really appreciate that you explicitly said that you were talking to the broader community, which I know is not exclusively limited to the environmentalists, but also to everybody, as well as to industry and to labor. I think that's a start of a comprehensive engagement method that should yield good results. I also appreciate that you have basically said that we need to do something. I think that's not as explicit, but I'll put the finer point on it, that leaving it exactly the way it is not really one of the primary alternatives here, and I appreciate that. I'm going to ask a couple questions. I might come back through into the queue. So clarifications, and I think Councillor Novick kind of asked around this, but this I think it might be adjacent. In alternatives 3 and 4, are we allowing conversion of what type of fuel is being stored completely as is? Meaning, are we allowing taking either an existing tank, draining it, and now storing renewables or aviation fuel in it, or dismantling the tank and replacing it with a tank or tanks of equal capacity that would store renewables or aviation fuel? Or is there regulation associated with that?
I think we are not regulating the type of fuel that goes into a tank.
Got it. Thanks. For alternative number 4, a couple questions. Was the 17% you said you got from the federal, was that for fossil fuels only or all liquid fuels, the 17%?
It's all petroleum products. One of the difficulties with the federal data is any sort of renewable component like ethanol is lumped with the fossil fuel component at this point. So
Categorized differently than.
yeah. So I would term it as a liquid fuel demand.
Okay. What was the Oregon specific percentage? You said you used the Pacific region. Was the Oregon one higher or lower?
They don't take that forecast and break it out by state. What we do in the discussion draft is basically apply those percentages to the current Oregon consumption.
I think he was asking, but there is a separate data point on Oregon only forecast.
Not for the forecast.
So when you picked the Pacific region and the 17%, what was the other option? What else could you have picked? Nationwide? What was,
As Commissioner or Councilor Novick was saying, we were looking at the Oregon Department of Energy Security study, and one of their scenarios shows that by 2035 we could need more like 33% less liquid fuel.
in alternative 4, would we have further drawdown goals beyond 2035?
We can, and I think as part of any sort of program like that, we would continue to monitor and report what that progress is. But we specifically picked 2035 as a good medium-term time frame, but also just, again, tying it to that investment program that is coming with DEQ and their seismic risk mitigation requirements.
It also happens to be the planning year for the entire comprehensive plan right now, so it lines up with that as well.
I will say that the risk of going further out is that then the companies can wait. You know, if we pick 50% by 2045, they're going to wait till 2040 or 2042 before they take anything offline.
Let me rephrase. In alternative 4, are we saying 17% by 2035 and a higher percentage, note and, a higher percentage by a later date, or is it literally just there and it's 17% forever after that?
Right now, we're just saying 17% till 2035 because that's a near-term milestone that has a little bit more certainty, if there's certainty at all in it. I think going beyond that, staff's feeling has been that there's less certainty about what happens beyond that. There could be a scenario in which, so the proposal as it's being proposed, or the draft as it's being suggested now, would be to just look at 17% by 2035 and to allow those regulations to be in place for a while to let some of this, these seismic mitigation plans happen and the investment happen, and then continue to monitor where the trends are going, and then think about coming back with further kind of reductions and further milestones further down the line as we have a little more experience with what's actually happening with the transition as well.
Okay. What happens if the 17% isn't met by 2035 if we were to go with alternative number 4?
Yeah, so I think that in part, this is where we've been having conversations with some of our Bureau partners about what monitoring and compliance looks like, and what, I guess, potentially enforcement would look like if the rules were not being met. So I'll just...
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the challenges we have in terms of establishing what that program would look like. And, do we have authority to impose financial penalties? Do we have, we typically, through the land use process, do not shut down businesses when they're in violation of the zoning code. But we're exploring what those options might be and trying to bring forward some alternatives.
Sure, and I think you said typically and also previously said that we can do things that are unique to the CEI Hub.
I would say that as it relates to non-conforming, basic principles in land use planning and law is that non-conforming uses can exist, but it's I don't know of any instances where businesses have actually been shut down. There's usually limits on any expansion. There's usually, some way to handle violations. And so there's a process for handling violations that allows people to come into conformance. And so that's typically what is done through land use regulations and zoning code and enforcement of land use regulations.
An example of that is like with drive-through facilities, the zoning code has restrictions on that. And it's not that we force a drawdown there, but there's enough turnover usually that a reduction happens because we have like limits on on grandfathering. If something shuts down, it has to either reopen within a certain number of months or it loses its rights. And that's the way you could think about it, the way we handle like things like gas stations and drive-throughs.
Okay. Two more. One, I agree with Councilor Murillo about alternatives 1 and 2 and the limits there of those. I understand that you use the anticipated demand reduction as a reason to come up with that number, but my question is, why are we talking about reflecting the market demand as opposed to either being a smaller share of the market or shaping the market through capacity regulation? Why is it that if demand doesn't go down, why are we limited by the expected reduction in demand as opposed to shaping the reduction in demand through reduced capacity?
I think, well, one of the reasons is being sensitive to sort of the overall Oregon economy and the fact that there are not, it's going to be very expensive to sort of replace this capacity elsewhere in the state.
Expensive for who?
For the overall region or the overall economy. I mean,
But not for the city government, for the industry, for the state.
For taxpayers as well.
it could be for consumers. Anyone that consumes liquid fuel presumably would have to pay a surcharge to, and I think the other thing to think about is that Portland is still the regional connection, right? We're still the end of the major pipeline. We're still the harbor. I guess maybe they would build a facility in Coos Bay and be able to supply a little bit of Southern Oregon, but when 70% of the fuel is consumed in the Willamette Valley, we're where it starts, and there's that basic challenge there.
Okay, and then last question. How are we specifically addressing the risk of fire and ensuring that we have firefighting infrastructure in place on the west side of the river that can handle what may happen? I understand that there are some scenarios that don't require industrial firefighting capacity on the western side of the river because the bridges are intact in certain types of disaster modeling, but there's a lot of situations that do involve bridge failure that I would like to understand on that.
That's probably the discussion that's happening with the part of this project that is more about emergency management coordination. It's unlikely that the zoning code would be the tool or the comprehensive plan policy would be the tool to get there.
Okay, that's fair, and I'm happy to talk to Richie. I see him back there. I guess I would love to know, because I know we're hearing from just one piece of it, and I do think we can combine these threads. I will say from the planning perspective, and I understand your point, Patricia, about certainty. And from a planning perspective, that makes sense. From a political perspective, what gives me certainty is knowing who's going to be voting for something right now up here. And I think that we are able to set in place a plan that doesn't require, it can be adjusted by future councils, of course, but that is not dependent on complete ambiguity about what's going to happen in the future. And so I am encouraged by the level of creativity and ambition so far, but would love to see more. And would love to see the riffing start at alternative 3 and progress to a 4, 5, 6 as well. But I'll let, sorry, I go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, you looked like you had something to say. So if you could introduce yourself to the record and answer, I think Councilor Canal asked some emergency management questions.
Well, for the record, my name is Richard Narval, Chief Residence Officer at Portland Bureau of Emergency Management. I'm working with BPS on the proposals the whole memo that they're working on, specifically on the emergency management section. And I think I've talked about this in previous meetings on how complex in terms of roles and responsibility the emergency management side of things are. Right now, where we are is in this budget session, we got a planner position approved, and my hope is that planner could help us support some of the emergency response planning specific to CEI Hub.
Are they hired yet?
No, it's the BHR process. We are in the process of hiring, but we have not hired yet.
Are they subject to the hiring freeze?
I can check on that. We were going to request. There's an exception process for that. So
Let me know if I can help.
Okay, we'll do.
That should not be, just because you're not 24/7 yet, when we're trying to get you there, both Councilor Novick and I have talked a lot about this, doesn't mean you should be subject to a non-24/7 hiring freeze. So if we can help with that box over there, happy to do it.
Will do.
I know that one of the boxes we can check on the hiring freeze question is whether council's specifically asking for it, and then we will certainly check that box in this case.
I'll stop here, but I might come back in the queue.
Yeah, we have plenty of time, so thank you all for your patience and for answering all of our questions today. I definitely want to echo what Councilor Canal said as far as a preference for my alternative would be option number 4. And I think a question that's still sitting with me from earlier discussion is that you said that we had considered projections that were a little bit more aggressive on the drawdown figure, as high as 30%. So why did we not go with a more aggressive drawdown figure? And did you consider the modeling that contemplates more aggressive actions? Or why was that approach rejected?
I think Tom touched on it earlier, which is we were trying to pay attention to the statewide economy and recognizing that Portland is a regional hub for this in terms of serving other states, and so that was why it was sort of balancing with the economic considerations. But certainly you could consider other numbers.
And we'll certainly spend more time looking at the various data sources and contemplate, what other possibilities there might be for that. So we appreciate that input, and we've heard similar from community, and so that is one of the many pieces of information that we're trying to factor into what will ultimately be a proposed plan.
Yeah, I think it's hard when we're talking about the economy overall versus the impact on Portlanders, because we know that if anything happens, it's going to be, I think, billions of dollars worth of cleanup of our river. And so the cost to our community and the long-term costs are so high that I think to me, it feels like we don't really have a choice but to push very aggressively on reducing fossil fuels. And I also agree with a point that Councilor Canal made as far as we have power and influence here. If we have a resource in a space that's needed, then we get to shape what our local economy looks like. And industry needs to respond to us and to the needs of our community members, because they're the ones who are incurring the risk of having this in our community. So their needs need to be prioritized if there are external companies and corporations that are going to be profiting off of our community. And with that, I will pass it to Councilor Novick, and then Councilor Canal has his hand up again.
I just wanted to observe that in response to the previous discussion about whether we were trying to follow the market or drive the market, the problem is that, if the J.D. Vance administration outlaws electric cars and we continue to gut the transit system and people have no choice but to drive gasoline cars, then if we say that there can't be any fossil fuel infrastructure, the effect will be that people will either be paying vast amounts of money to drive their cars, or they'll have to walk, which for some people is not feasible. So we have to operate in a context where there's a lot of things that we can't control, and but also, fortunately, in the state of Oregon, there's people who are helping us. I mean, DEQ is going to require that all of these tanks be retrofitted to withstand an earthquake by 2035. The state has enacted or is in the process of reenacting the Climate Protection Program, which should dramatically reduce fossil fuel use, which will mean that there's going to be a drawdown in capacity regardless of what we do. So I just want to note that, I mean, we have limited power. B, the state is ultimately our ally on this. It's more a comment than a question.
Yeah, I was going to say. Councillor Canal?
I appreciate the comments here and the discussion. I have a lot of faith in DEQ. I don't have a lot of faith in the state legislature in terms of transportation infrastructure and the things necessary to create that demand reduction, personally, after this legislative session. That would change if they do better in the next session. So I'll say that. I also would say that Councillor Novik's right, that if all these terrible things that he just mentioned occur, we would be in a place where our regulations might be too restrictive. I think that this room has never had a problem loosening regulations on fossil fuels when needed. And I think it's been harder to go the other direction. So when we have the opportunity, we should look at that personally. Never is a strong word. Rarely. So that's sort of the context for it. I'll also say that we could also have described that scenario slightly differently, right? We could look at it as we would be creating a situation where we have to invest at that point in transit at both a local and a state level. In the event that, please don't ever say J.D. Vance administration again, but in the event that those sorts of federal and possibly state actions affect us in a way that forces us to take that work on, to which I can only say, don't threaten me with a good time. And I want to be more ambitious in that regard because we can. And also because everything we do is going to shape the market, right? That 17%, it could be 16, it could be 18. It's not going to be, they're never perfect predictions, right? So no matter what we're doing, we're going to shape it in some way. That's a little bit off topic, but I did want to ask, there's the use of words like limit, restrict, they're a little bit vague for what I'm hoping to get out of it. How can we get a little bit more clarity? When I first read, I think it's in the policy list in the slides, it did not seem like, it's one of those things that unless you're actually looking for a difference in meaning, you might not immediately observe it. I get encourage and require, those are different. So some of them, but I just wanted to ask, like, how are we able to get some more clarity on this?
Yeah, I think we can start by saying that it's pretty common in comprehensive plan parlance to use these kinds of words, and they have, they do have specific meanings in a sense, and the comp plan actually talks about that. But I think where you're seeing the limit and restrict is essentially, alternatives 1 and 2 are more in the vein of limiting, right? So because they still allow some expansion, for example, whereas that's why we show that, if you noticed, we show that the word restrict would probably come into play more when we're talking about alternative 4. So we're just recognizing that that verb may change based on which of the regulatory alternatives we pursue. And that's really, the significance of those words. Yeah.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think restrict conveys reduce.
Okay, we can definitely think about that.
We can go into more depth about the meaning of verbs. There's a long history of litigation in land use about the meaning of verbs.
And I recognize on those sorts of details, you definitely know more than I do on the legal side of it. I'm trying to speak for how I think it'll be interpreted by the public. So to the degree that we can check both of those boxes at the same time, I'd like to.
Sure, we'll look at those words and think about what should work best.
The last question I had is about the scoping of this project as it relates to the pipelines. So District 2, we have 2 pretty significant pipelines that are going to be related to this because they go to the CEI hub. We have, in particular, the one that runs to the airport. And just wanting to understand, is the only place that's affected by this project the transloading conversation and the question over whether or not pipes can be expanded from, I think you said 6 or 8 inches to 12 inches? Or are there other places in which the pipeline conversation is part of this? And I'll also say that's also a question for Rachit as well. So
the major pipelines are not part of this project. We're really talking about the facility piping and infrastructure. The Olympic pipeline is an interstate pipeline and therefore subject to federal regulation, and we're preempted from regulating that. And that, I don't know, maybe you know more, but I believe, again, that the pipeline to the airport is more of a state regulatory function than a city function, but I'd have to dig deeper into that.
Yeah, I would have to check on the airport pipeline too, but I can speak to the risk. All the pipeline is all west of Cascadia, the Olympic pipeline, so it is in high risk, and it is documented under Dogami and other risk assessment reports that there will be interruptions or there will be ruptures in those pipelines. So that is documented. FEMA has hosted exercise in the last 12 months that talks about or discusses state, local, and federal planning on what that fuel disruption could mean for the economy and also islanding that it can create. So there's some conversations that have happened with that risk awareness, but in terms of the regulation authority for Port of Portland, I can check and report back on that.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that it included economic effects. Did it also include health and environmental effects?
That particular exercise that I attended was focused on economic and food security impacts. It did, obviously health came up, but that wasn't one of the objectives for the exercise that we were testing. But yes, it was brought up, and there will be there's documentation that supports that could.
And obviously there's related in the economic food security. That's health related directly, not just indirectly. So I appreciate that. I will say, at least in part, based on, and I haven't gotten a map yet on where the pipeline is, despite having asked a couple times, but I do see those little yellow signs that tell me there's a pipeline under streets that I personally go on in my neighborhoods. And those are city streets. So it's under our right of way. And I do think, at least in the context of the roads, we should have some ability to influence what's running under them.
That's correct. The pipelines are subject to our franchise utility regulations, and they do have franchises with the city to be where they are in the right of way. I think our regulation of that is mostly concerned with getting compensation for the maintenance of the right of way, but and our leverage there is probably limited by interstate commerce. That we'd have to talk more about that with the attorney. But we do hold utility franchises for the Olympic pipeline and the pipeline to the airport.
So the pipeline to the airport, where does it leave Oregon?
I don't think it does.
So how is interstate commerce?
It's not.
When I spoke of interstate commerce, I was talking about the Olympic pipeline.
Okay. I recognize that there may be a vast difference in what we're able to do on one versus the other.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Novick, and then I have a final question as well.
I was assuming that when I Google climate protection program, it brings up the current DEQ rule as opposed to the one that was tossed out a couple of years ago. I was just being reminded that it places a declining cap on greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels, which is designed to reduce those emissions 50% by 2035 and 90% by 2050. And I was wondering if in the Climate Commission, in the Planning Commission deliberations, we might be inviting people from DEQ to talk about how they expect that to be achieved, the extent to which they expect it to be achieved by simply reducing fossil fuel use as opposed to replacing current fuels with renewables. And another question is, I mean, although I understand the general concern about uncertainty about the future, given that the Climate Protection Program does anticipate reduction of 90% by 2050, is there an argument for doing what Councilor Canal was saying and saying that we have requirements for declining capacity at the CEI hub that track what the Climate Protection Program is requiring?
I would just start out by saying that I think that's information that we can certainly look into more. As we are developing the proposed plan, we can include information in the proposed plan specifically about that. And I think that just requires a little bit more investigation on our part.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Novick. So some of these companies that are holding the fuel right now, they're not using the full storage capacity. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, that each of them uses a different level and at different times.
So these companies, according to some of these templates that we've been given with the 17%, are going to reduce their capacity based on the current maximum allowable, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess I didn't phrase that as a question. I just wanted to have that clarified. But that was the final question that I had. Friends, do we have any more questions for our lovely panel? It's been very patient with us today.
Thank you very much.
Oh, nope. Councilor Canal has another one.
Just a comment. It's just a short comment.
Short comment. We love a short comment.
I'm excited for this. I will just say that like half the people in this room have been educating people around the risks associated with this facility and all the related infrastructure for a while, and I just wanted to appreciate them, along with all the others who are not in this room right now. I think maybe 5 years ago, most people in Portland were not familiar with the term CEI Hub, but if you paid any attention to the campaign last year, you definitely knew about it, and sure as heck every candidate did too. So I just wanted to express that appreciation and say that given that level of knowledge and that level of awareness of the risks associated with it, I want to make sure that we have a just transition that works for industry, for labor, for the environmental and health risks, for sure, but reflects also that increased level of awareness. I know that your processes have been going on for a long time, and asking you to make changes at any stage is going to be hard with all of the work that's already been done. But I just wanted to sort of signal that and agree with Councilor Maria's points about where the alternatives that we prefer might be.
Thank you for that, Councilor Canal. Thank you so much for coming and answering all of our questions, and ditto to everything about all of the advocates who have been educating and organizing for our community for many years on this issue. Our next meeting is going to be on Thursday, October 23rd, and at that meeting, we're anticipating a presentation on the PSEF Climate Investment Plan and a preview before our full council work session of that on October 30th. Again, just want to reiterate for the public watching this that the comment period is still open for the CEI Hub. You can go to the CEI Hub map app and give comments there until October 17th, and then we will have further discussions in other spaces. So this is not the final chance to get a comment in, but one good opportunity. And with that, I will close the Climate Committee at 11 a.m. Thank you so much.
What? That was fun, yeah. This is a good group to have that discussion with.
No, don't scare me. Man, I'm body like seizing up. Yeah.